I was halfway through reviewing a proposal when my phone buzzed, Mom's name flashing on the screen like a ghost from another life. Outside my office window, Manhattan glimmered in the late afternoon light, glass towers burning gold. Inside, everything was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic click of my pen against the mahogany desk. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I hadn't heard from her in months. The last time we spoke, she told me, "You need to stop expecting handouts, Emily. We've done enough." That was 2 years ago, right after they'd given my sister, Grace, $8 million to help her settle down. Now, I was the one who'd settled, just not in the way they imagined. The silk cuff of my blouse brushed against my wrist as I picked up the phone. My assistant's voice echoed faintly from the outer office, the scent of fresh coffee lingering in the air. "Mom," I said, keeping my tone even. "Oh, sweetheart," she began, the kind of voice she used when she wanted something. "Your sister's business hit a rough patch. We're all so worried. Maybe you could." I smiled faintly, leaning back in my chair. The city stretched before me, wide, endless mine. Maybe I could what? I asked softly. Silence. Then a sigh. That was the moment I knew. The tables had finally turned. I still remember the exact day. Everything changed. It was a warm Sunday afternoon in June, the kind where sunlight poured through the curtains and made everything look softer than it really was. I was 23, fresh out of college, and still foolish enough to believe that family meant fairness. Dad was sitting at the head of the dining table, swirling his iced tea as if he were about to announce the stock market results. Grace sat beside him, her blonde curls bouncing, a grin already tugging at her lips. Mom was unusually quiet, which should have been my first warning. "Your father and I have made a decision," she began, folding her napkin carefully. "We're giving Grace $8 million. It's a wedding gift, really, a way for her and Ryan to start their lives together." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but no one else did. Dad cleared his throat. "We think it's time you started learning independence, Emily. You've had every opportunity, but it's time to stop expecting help." Help. That word hit harder than any slap could have. I felt my throat tighten. "You mean you're giving her everything? And I get what? A life lesson." Grace tried to sound sympathetic, but her voice dripped with victory. "It's not like you need money, Em. You're the smart one, remember? You'll figure it out." My hands trembled as I set down my fork. The air around me felt heavy, suffocating. For years, I'd been the quiet daughter, responsible, dependable, invisible. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't family to them. I was an investment that never paid off. I left the table before the tears could win. Upstairs, I found the small leather journal my grandmother had given me on my 16th birthday. Inside the front cover, she had written in her looping script, "Build something they can't take away from you." That night, I packed a suitcase and left home. No dramatic speech, no goodbye. Just silence, the kind that follows a storm when everything stills. As the bus pulled away from the house, I watched the familiar streets fade into the distance. My parents' mansion shrank until it was nothing more than a blur of light and shadow, a place I no longer belonged to. I promised myself right then I would never ask them for anything again. The first year after I left home was the hardest. I rented a cramped studio in Brooklyn where the heater rattled louder than my thoughts and the window faced a brick wall. I worked double shifts at a coffee shop by day and answered freelance design gigs by night, sleeping in 3-hour bursts between deadlines. Sometimes, I'd open my grandmother's leather journal just to remind myself why I was doing it. Her words, "Build something they can't take away from you," became a quiet mantra I whispered over the sound of the city outside my window. I started teaching myself digital marketing and branding, things I knew nothing about but desperately wanted to master. I watched free tutorials, took online certifications I could barely afford, and sent out proposals to clients who never replied. Still, I kept going. One evening, a woman named Linda Carson, a senior brand strategist at a major firm, stopped by the cafe where I worked. She ordered her usual, black coffee, no sugar. But that day, she noticed the doodles on my receipt pad, sketches of logos, product ideas, typography layouts. You did these? She asked, raising a brow. Embarrassed, I nodded. Come see me Monday, she said simply, slipping me her card. That Monday changed everything. Linda became my mentor, my anchor, the first person who looked at me and saw not potential, but power. She pushed me to refine my craft, to pitch fearlessly, to take up space in rooms that once made me shrink. Under her guidance, I climbed from intern to associate, then to senior strategist in less than 3 years. But I wasn't content to just climb someone else's ladder. I wanted to build my own. By 28, I launched Eleanor Creative, a boutique branding agency named after my grandmother. I poured every dollar, every sleepless night, every ounce of faith into it. There were failures, campaigns that flopped, clients that vanished, months I could barely cover rent. But each setback taught me something invaluable. I didn't need approval. I needed endurance. The breakthrough came when a small eco-friendly skincare startup hired me for a full rebrand. My design went viral, investors poured in, and so did clients. Within a year, I had a small team, a downtown office, and a waiting list of brands wanting to work with us. By 31, I owned 3 subsidiaries, held keynote talks across the country, and had a 7-figure portfolio. Yet when Mom texted me on holidays, asking how I was doing, I always kept it vague. Doing fine, just busy, I'd reply. They thought I was still renting a modest apartment, living paycheck to paycheck. I let them believe it. There was something strangely satisfying in their ignorance, not out of spite, but peace. For once, my worth wasn't theirs to measure. And as I stood in the quiet glow of my corner office each night, I'd glance at my reflection in the glass, tired, yes, but strong, and think, this is what they said I couldn't do. 2 weeks after Mom's unexpected call, they arrived. I'd almost convinced myself they wouldn't actually show up, that it was another guilt-laced plea meant to test how much I'd changed. But there they were, standing in the glass lobby of my company's headquarters, their reflections caught in the marble floor like ghosts from a life I'd already outgrown. Mom looked exactly the same, immaculate hair, pearls that probably cost more than my first year's rent. Dad had aged, though. The confidence in his eyes had dulled into something quieter. And Grace, she was trying too hard not to look defeated, dressed in a designer blazer that couldn't hide the tension in her jaw. Emily, Mom said, her voice trembling between pride and discomfort. You look well. I smiled politely. I am. They didn't know that the floor they were standing on, the sleek, sunlit office space buzzing with quiet efficiency, was mine. My name was etched in silver on the glass wall behind reception. Eleanor Creative, founder and CEO, Emily Rhodes. Thank you for seeing us, sweetheart, Dad said, glancing around. We didn't realize your company was here. I motioned toward the elevator. Come up. We can talk in my office. The ride was silent except for the soft hum of jazz music. Grace avoided my gaze. When the doors opened to the 42nd floor, they stepped into a space designed from years of dreams. White oak floors, panoramic city views, art collected from local women artists. A wall of awards gleamed beside framed campaign photos, work that had shaped brands across the country. Mom's lips parted slightly. You work here? No, I said, unlocking the glass door with my keycard. I own it. Their silence was everything I imagined it would be, sharp, stunned, a mix of disbelief and shame. Dad cleared his throat. This is impressive, Emily. Really? We had no idea. I know, I replied simply, settling behind my desk. You never ask. Grace shifted uncomfortably, her voice small. I didn't mean for things to go wrong, Em. The business Ryan and I started, it's just falling apart. We invested everything. Mom and Dad already helped once, but her words trailed off. She didn't need to finish. Mom's voice was softer now, pleading. She's your sister. If you could just, maybe a loan or some guidance. You've done so well for yourself. It's your turn to help the family. I looked at them, the same people who'd once told me to stop expecting handouts. The irony wasn't lost on me. Funny, I said quietly, running my fingers along the edge of my grandmother's journal, now displayed on my desk. You gave Grace $8 million and told me I'd make it on my own. Looks like you were right. The words hung in the air like a reckoning. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Please. I know I didn't treat you fairly, but I'm scared. I don't know what to do. For a moment, I saw the sister I used to share secrets with, before money drew invisible lines between us. I sighed, softening just enough to let compassion slip through the cracks. I'll think about it, I said. But things don't go back to how they were. If I help, it won't be out of guilt. It'll be on my terms. Mom nodded slowly, unable to meet my eyes. Of course, she murmured. As they left, I watched their reflections fade into the elevator's mirrored doors. The girl they dismissed had built an empire from nothing, and now they finally had to see her. They called the next day. This time it was Grace, her voice small, hesitant, like someone afraid to step on old glass. Emily, she began softly, I talked to Ryan last night. We're drowning, The bank's threatening foreclosure, and I don't know what else to do. For a moment, I said nothing. I looked out the window of my apartment, the skyline glowing against the evening haze, the hum of life continuing far below me. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was clarity. Meet me tomorrow, I said finally. 10 a.m. at my office. Bring Mom and Dad. When they arrived, I was ready. I had the terms printed neatly on letterhead, not contracts, but principles. I wanted them to understand that this wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. Grace sat across from me, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. Mom's eyes darted nervously between us, and Dad's face was unreadable, pride wounded, but silent. I placed the papers on the table. If I decide to help, I said calmly, it'll be under these conditions. Grace blinked. Conditions? Yes. I folded my hands. First, you'll pay back every cent once your business stabilizes. Not to me, but into a foundation I'm starting. It'll fund scholarships for women who've been told they weren't enough. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Second, I continued, turning to my parents, no more lectures about independence. You don't get to preach self-reliance when you bought it for someone else. From now on, we treat each other as equals, not as your investment projects. Dad exhaled slowly. That's fair, he said, almost quietly. Third, I said, looking at Grace again, if I help you rebuild, you'll take a salary cap until your company is profitable. You'll also mentor one young woman entrepreneur every year. No shortcuts. You'll earn your way, just like I did. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes glossy, full of a mix of shame and gratitude. I can do that, she whispered. I leaned back, studying them all, 3 people who once defined my worth, now sitting across from me, waiting for my permission to start over. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry at them. I was in control, calm, centered, certain. Then we have an agreement, I said finally, sliding the papers toward them. But remember, this isn't about the money. It's about learning what it feels like to build something you can't lose. Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling as it brushed mine. Emily, we were wrong, she said softly. We should have believed in you from the start. I smiled, not out of revenge, but release. You don't have to apologize. I believed in me. That's what matters. For once, the silence between us didn't feel like distance. It felt like peace, the kind that comes after you've reclaimed your power without needing to destroy anyone else's. 3 months later, Grace's business began to recover. She followed every condition I'd laid out, humbled, disciplined, and surprisingly sincere. She sent me weekly updates, not to prove herself, but to stay accountable. I could hear the shift in her tone, no longer defensive, no longer entitled. Just human. My parents softened too. Dad called one evening just to ask how I was doing, not about work, not about Grace, but me. Mom started visiting the scholarship foundation I'd launched, meeting the young women we sponsored. Once, she left a voicemail after speaking with a single mother from Detroit. Her voice cracked when she said, "Now I understand what strength looks like, Emily." It looks like you. Some nights, I still sat alone in my office, the city sprawling beneath me like a living pulse. I'd pour a glass of wine, open my grandmother's old leather journal, and trace her handwriting with my thumb. Build something they can't take away from you. She was right, but she'd left out one truth I had to discover myself. When you build something real, you also build yourself. The girl who once left home with a suitcase and a bruised heart was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew the value of her voice, her effort, her peace. One Friday afternoon, Grace stopped by unannounced. She placed a check on my desk, the first repayment installment for the foundation. "I wanted you to be the first to get it," she said softly. "You didn't just save my business, Em. You saved me." I smiled, standing to hug her. "No," I whispered. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." As she left, I looked out the window again, sunlight bouncing off the skyline, the same view that once symbolized struggle now gleaming with quiet triumph. I closed the journal, my fingers lingering on its worn cover. For years, I thought my parents' rejection defined me, but the truth was it refined me. It pushed me to grow into someone who didn't need their validation, or anyone's. So when people ask how I did it, how I built everything from nothing, I always smile and say the same thing. They gave my sister $8 million, but I gave myself everything I needed. Bottom of form.